Chapter 22. Black Power. Didn't take long for the mutated racism to show up, but it also didn't take long for the mutated rebellion to meet that racism and look it square in the eye. Actually, it was met with a little more than a mean look. See, 5 days after the Voting Rights Act was signed into law, a social bomb exploded in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles when a police incident set off 6 days of violence. This became the deadliest and most destructive urban rebellion in history. Enough. Enough. There was no more picketing, no more marching. The squawking mockingbird had stopped its pecking and had transformed into a panther brandishing teeth. As Watts burned, Angela Davis boarded a boat headed for Germany to get her graduate degree in philosophy. Shortly after she arrived in September 1965, an international group of scholars gathered in Copenhagen for the Race and Color Conference. Davis didn't attend. But if she had, she would have heard lectures on the racist role of language symbolism. Scholars pointed out everyday phrases such as black sheep, blackballing, blackmail, and blacklisting, among others that had long associated blackness and negativity. 2 other words could have been included, words that still exist today. Minority, as if black people are minor, making white people major, and ghetto, a term first used to describe an undesirable area of a city in which Jewish people were forced to live. But in the racist context of America, ghetto and minority became synonymous for black. And all 3 of those words seemed to be knives. That is, until people like Stokely Carmichael showed up. Carmichael was born in Trinidad in 1941 and moved to the Bronx in 1952, the same year his idol, Malcolm X, was paroled from prison. In 1964, Carmichael graduated from Howard University. By then, Malcolm's disciples, including Carmichael, were saying that the word Negro was to describe black assimilationists, and black was for the anti-racists, removing the ugliness and evil that had been attached to it. They were now passionately embracing the term black, which stunned Martin Luther King Jr.'s Negro disciples and their own assimilationist parents and grandparents who would rather be called nigger than black. Carmichael was the kind of guy who'd rather be called dead than afraid. He was the new chairman of the SNCC. And a year after the uprising in Watts, he and the SNCC found themselves at a rally in Greenwood, Mississippi called the March Against Fear. It was at this rally that Carmichael would exclaim a culture-shifting phrase. What we're going to start saying now is black power. Black power. And when black people, especially the disenfranchised but also anti-racist ones, caught wind of this phrase and married it to Malcolm X's autobiography, Black Power basically sums up the book. Black power became a red fire burning in the black community and burning down the white one. Well, maybe not burning it down, but definitely heating its butt. What Stokely Carmichael meant by black power: black people owning and controlling their own neighborhoods and futures free of white supremacy. What racist white people in media heard: black supremacy. And once again, the mere notion of anti-racist ideas got purposely jumbled into hateful extremism. There were even black civil rights leaders such as Roy Wilkins of the NAACP who were against the black power mantra. Wilkins thought it was reverse Mississippi and reverse Hitler. He would have been one of the black people Malcolm X referred to as a Negro. Despite all the assimilationist vomit coming from the black elites and the racist vomit coming from white segregationists, Carmichael and his black power mantra pushed on. He traveled around the country, speaking, building the movement. But another movement was sprouting up at the same time. Oakland, California. 2 frustrated young men started their own 2-man movement. They called themselves the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. I'm sure you've seen the photos. These days they're on t-shirts and posters randomly plastered around places as if the Black Panthers were Disney. They weren't. The black hats and leather jackets, the sunglasses and guns, all were real. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale weren't characters. They were men, fed up. So they composed a 10-point platform of things they were fighting for in the newly founded Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. The 10-point platform, paraphrased: 1. Power to determine the destiny of our black community. 2. Full employment. 3. An end to the robbery of the black community by the government. 4. Decent housing. 5. Real education. 6. For all black men to be exempt from military service. 7. An immediate end to police brutality and murder of black people. 8. Freedom for all black prisoners. 9. For all black people on trial to be tried by a jury of their peers. 10. Peace and black representation in the United Nations. In the next few years, the Black Panther Party spread in chapters across the country, attracting thousands of committed and charismatic young community members. They policed the police, provided free breakfast for children, and organized medical services and political educational programs, among a series of other initiatives. And with the Black Panther Party growling and the Black Power movement howling, Angela Davis was in Germany reading about it all. Finally, when she couldn't take being outside the action any longer, she packed up and moved back to America. It was the summer of 1967. Angela Davis was bound for California, the University of California, San Diego to be exact. And as soon as she got there, she settled in and ramped up the Black Power movement, immediately starting a black student union on campus. Wherever there were black students, they were building BSUs or taking over student governments, requesting and demanding an anti-racist and relevant education at historically black and historically white colleges. All sorts of different minds engaged with Black Power: separatists, Pan-Africanists, and everything in between. Black Power even appealed to the face of the civil rights movement. That's right, even Dr. King, in 1967, was turning away from assimilationist thought in the same way W.E.B. Du Bois had later in his life. Dr. King had now realized that desegregation was good only for elite black people, while everyone else was harmed by it. It left millions drowning in poverty. So King switched gears and started planning the Southern Christian Leadership Conference's Poor People's Campaign. His goal was to bring poor people to Washington, D.C. in order to force the government to pass an economic bill of rights committing to full employment, guaranteed income, and affordable housing, a bill that sounded a lot like the economic proposals in the Black Panther Party's 10-point platform. Of course, King was criticized by his own people. Of course, white rage and fear sparked up. Too many protests, civil rights, poor people, Vietnam War. Too many protests. Of course, there was a moment in the media, a pop culture phenomenon like the birth of a nation or Tarzan, to send a message to white people to take up arms and be afraid, and also to send a shock through the confident backbone of Black America to remind them of their place. This time, in 1968, the movie was called Planet of the Apes. Here's the basic plot. 1. White astronauts land on a planet after a 2,000-year journey. 2. Apes enslave them. 3. Turns out they're not on a faraway planet at all. They're on Earth. 4. No! While Tarzan put the racist conquering of Africa and Africans on the screen, Planet of the Apes stoked the racist fear fire by showing the dark world rising against the white conqueror. And just like with Tarzan, Planet of the Apes went boom. Became a mega hit complete with the sequels and comics and merchandise. And just like that, the conversation coming from the American government shifted to protect their planet. Black Power was met by a new slogan, one spat out like a racist slur: law and order. A week later, on April 4th, Angela Davis was at the new office of the SNCC in Los Angeles. The newly organized SNCC chapter was her new activist home as she shuffled back and forth between Los Angeles and her doctoral studies at UC San Diego. That afternoon, she heard a scream. Following the scream came the news. Dr. King, after giving a speech that referenced a human rights revolution, had been shot dead. King's death transformed countless doubly conscious activists into singly conscious anti-racists, and Black Power suddenly grew into the largest American anti-racist movement ever. There was a shift happening. James Brown made a song that insisted everyone say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud. Black people started to move away from colorism, and some reversed. The darker the better, the kinkier the hair the better, the more African the clothing the better. From 1967 to 1970, Black students and their hundreds of thousands of non-Black allies compelled nearly 1,000 colleges and universities spanning almost every U.S. state to introduce Black Studies departments, programs, and courses. The demand for Black Studies filtered down into K-12 schools too, where textbooks still often presented African Americans as subhuman happy slaves. Early Black Studies intellectuals went to work on new anti-racist textbooks. Black Studies and Black Power ideas in general also began to inspire anti-racist transformations among non-Blacks. White hippies who had been anti-Vietnam War had now begun pledging to try to strip the influence of racism from white Americans. Puerto Rican anti-racists and the emerging Brown Power movement, which also challenged the color hierarchy. And while the movement continued to grow, Angela Davis was dipping her toe in different waters. See, the Black Power movement wasn't perfect, of course. And though it had a righteous cause, it was still sexist. Men ran it all. Women were pushed to the back like they'd been in every racial liberation movement in history. So Davis started seriously considering joining the Communist Party, which at the time was feared by the American government, who thought the communists and communism, which was rooted in ending social classes, would overthrow democracy. Davis, a subscriber to the communist ideas of revolution, felt the Communist Party hadn't paid enough attention to race. But there was a collective of communists of color that did. The Che Lumumba Club. They were all it took to push her over the edge and join the party. Her first role was working on the campaign for the first Black woman to run for the U.S. presidency, the Communist Party candidate Charlene Mitchell. In the 1968 presidential election, Mitchell squared off against Lyndon Johnson's Vice President Hubert Humphrey. Richard Nixon ran on the Republican ticket. His innovative campaign would reveal the future of racist ideas.